Hi there, my name is Lauren. I'm a best-selling author and entrepreneur, and in today's video, I thought we could review a specific Shark Tank episode that I came across the other day. And if you're not super familiar with Shark Tank, it is essentially an American business reality television series that started in 2009, which ironically was right around the time of the Great Recession. I think I was probably 12 or 13 years old when it came out during that time. And basically, entrepreneurs make business presentations or pitches to a panel of about 5 different venture capitalists or investors in startups called sharks who decide whether or not to invest in their companies. So I thought this would be a really cool intersection of business and books in particular. And who doesn't love Shark Tank? I don't know if you've seen it before, but if you haven't, you're going to today. So this is going to be covering a woman named Lori who wrote a collection of stress management books and audiobooks on CDs for children and I think even teenagers. So she is asking for $250,000 for like a 20% royalty stake. So let's go ahead and dive into what that conversation looks like. And then I'm going to stop periodically throughout the TV show to just kind of explain my thoughts, things that, I think could be elaborated on a little bit more. So this is going to kind of be a reaction video. So let's not delay it any longer and get right into it.
Hi, I'm Lori Light, and the name of my company is Stress-Free Kids.
So here's what we got here. I'm interpreting this font, Stress-Free Kids, as like martial arts font. You got a girl who's like sitting yogi position, which is cool, but she's in a bubble. There's a lot of bubbles, so I get like bath time vibes from that. And then I don't know if this is like a dog or an otter down here. You got a turtle down here. So I'm getting a few mixed signals. I'm thinking like stress-free bath time or something. I know that they're on a budget. I don't need to be that picky, but this is where my marketing brain goes. The red conflicts with the rainbow, with the blues. She needs better branding or more cohesive branding, I should say.
I not only wrote, but I produced and I published.
Wow.
Okay, so she self-published, it sounds like, which is really interesting because if this was filmed in 2009, maybe 2008, depending on production schedule, this was right around the time that e-commerce was becoming more popularized. I did a video a while back about the rise and fall of Borders bookstore. I kind of went down a rabbit hole with that. It's very interesting. You should consider taking a look at it. And during my research, I found out that Borders basically lost to Amazon. It was absolutely 100% preventable. Before they had a website kind of up and going and like online checkouts and online buying and stuff like that, they were outsourcing all of that to Amazon, their competitor. Any online book sales they got, they would redirect them to Amazon, which was an incredibly stupid mistake in my opinion. So Amazon, in case you don't know, started out selling books. So that made a lot of sense. They were one of the few gradually becoming more popularized platforms out there. And I want to say around that same time, they were experimenting with self-publishing. They had a platform for that. Obviously, it's way more popular now than it was 10, 15 years ago. There's a ton more bells and whistles. There's a whole program for it. You got KDP and all that. So at the time, I would imagine that this is kind of relatively new and fresh for people when majority of authors were seeking traditional book publishing deals, right? That's like what you think of when you think of the book deal. You're signing a contract, you're working with a publisher. People can work with small, mid-size, and larger presses. And I imagine we're going to get a little bit more into that later. So that's kind of cool though, that she was self-publishing at a time like when it was just starting to kind of become a little more popularized. So I'll be curious to hear the sales data, the facts and figures around that.
How much have you made in sales of this stuff?
Well, last year I moved 30,000 units.
Wow.
Whoa. And she's got six books is I think what I saw. So let's say we're dividing that evenly. 30,000 units, 30,000 books sold roughly across 6 books. What would that be? Like 5,000 per book, I think. That's really good. I would say that for self-publishing, especially at this time, especially during the Great Recession, I mean, anything more than a few hundred generally is really good. So the fact that she moved 30,000, that's good without having a publisher, as far as I know.
30,000 units?
Yes,
Out of your kitchen?
out of my kitchen.
So, Lorianne, the 30,000 units you sold last year,
Yes.
what was the total sales?
180,000 in revenues.
Wow.
And on that 180,000, how much did you make? How much was left on that?
50,000 in profit.
Wow. So out of 180,000 in revenue, she made, what was it, 50,000 in profit? That's about a 30% profit margin. I'm not as knowledgeable in like product sales. I'm more of a service kind of person than a product person, but I mean, the overhead doesn't seem that crazy. I mean, I don't know what things looked like at the time when e-commerce was just kind of coming around, but I mean, it's definitely better than other sales figures that I've heard on this show.
Is there real proof out there that children are feeling this kind of stress, that there's a real...
Great question. Is there a market for what she's doing? Anytime, this doesn't just have to be for VC fund or venture capital funding, or if you're looking for investors or anything like that. These are also essential questions for agents, or if you're wanting to work with a publisher or anything like that. Is there a market? Is it timely? Is it relevant? Does this kind of thing make sense to even have? Nothing sucks more than putting your blood, sweat, tears, and countless sacrifices into something that doesn't have a market. And I feel like sometimes what happens, and there are other people who are so much smarter and so much more experienced out there than me, so feel free to chime in if you're like a business tycoon type person. But I feel like what happens is that sometimes people take matters into their own hands when they face a very particular problem or challenge, and they create a solution for themselves that they want to distribute to the many to prevent them from feeling or facing what they felt or faced, which is great. Sometimes, though, that problem can be really hyper-particular, really specific, and you're the only person who benefits from something like that. Other times, you do your research, you make a few modifications or adjustments maybe to match the rest of the market, and sometimes it can work out. There was one episode that I watched just a couple days ago with my fiance about a woman who made like a sticky, I don't even know what to call it. It was like a sticky note management flip out thing. And you would, like, you have a laptop, right? And you would like attach it to the side of your laptop and put your sticky notes on there instead of putting it around the frame of your laptop. And when they asked her, how many of these have you sold? She said none. They're saying, why would someone want to buy something like that? How much does something like that cost? She said it was about $10 for this little flip out maneuver. And mind you, this was back in 2009. So, today it's probably worth about $20. I don't know of anyone who would pay $20 to put their sticky note on something other than maybe their laptop or their refrigerator. She didn't have any kind of research that was done. She has no sales. She didn't know what production costs would be to produce something like that, right? Why wouldn't someone just use a notebook? Why wouldn't someone just use an online task or notes management tool or something? Why not just create a checklist, get a calendar? That's the importance of market research. It's one thing to solve a problem for yourself and make it a hobby, and then it's another to see a problem that you, as well as a lot of other people, face, and wanting to create a comprehensive solution that can be backed by venture capital funding. And I don't know much about VC funding. That is so out of my wheelhouse, but those are really, really great questions to answer. Do your research. Is there a market for this? Why are you the one to do it? Why is this relevant? Why do people need to buy it? What other alternatives are out there that aren't working? What other books are out there that are similar to yours that maybe have or have not seen success? And how is yours going to be the one that's differentiated? What's unique about you and your product, in this case, a book or whatever, right? So all great questions to ask. I also made a video a while ago about 10 essential questions every author needs to be able to answer. So if you want to get more of the lowdown on that, definitely check that out. I'll have it linked.
There is. I think it's 13 out of 100 children have anxiety disorders.
Why haven't you gone to a children's book publisher and say, look what I've done. I've sold 30,000 of these.
Well, you get paid a very small percentage.
But you sell a lot of books.
These are all really, really great questions, right? And I've talked about it before. Why self-publishing over working with a traditional publisher? Again, this was at a time when e-commerce was just now becoming popularized, when self-publishing was just starting to become a little more normalized. A lot of people are working with publishing houses around this time. And there's often a misconception for debut novelists or debut authors in particular, first-time authors, who seek out an agent maybe for representation to get a publishing deal, is that they think that because they're with a publisher, someone who's reputable, who has more resources than them, they're taking on the cost of production, maybe even some marketing. They think that it's all going to be taken care of for them, that they're going to sell a lot of different copies, that they're going to get all kinds of marketing support. Isn't necessarily the case. It can be. I would say that that's more of the exception than the norm. It depends on the size of the publisher that you're going with. If you're going with a big publisher, they have a lot of resources at their disposal, but they're extremely competitive because they publish a lot of big names versus maybe small presses who maybe are more likely to take a risk on unknown authors and be willing to fund some of their marketing opportunities, right? Each publisher, each press operates completely differently, right? Everyone lives in the same neighborhood. That is the book business. but their houses might be different sizes, right? Their houses might be in different shapes. Their houses or, their living conditions, right? That is their business model. It's going to be a little bit different. Some are healthier than others. Some are bigger than others. It really, really, really just varies, right? But it's all within the same neighborhood where everyone kind of knows each other, right? So if you come in not knowing how things work, or you haven't taken the time to at least understand or dive a little bit into some of the nuances and expectations and roles of the industry, it can lead to a lot of disappointment. A lot of authors feel disappointment. I'm not naming any names, I'm not poking fingers, just generally based on the research that I've done. A lot of authors who have worked with these large publishers feel a little bit discouraged because they didn't get what they thought that they were going to get, because all of the resources went to the big names who are almost guaranteed to sell large quantities of books because they have a big name, right? So just do your research, and that will kind of help inform your expectations. If I went traditional, I have a traditional book publishing deal. I didn't have an agent. I worked with a small press. I did that because I was a poor graduate student and I did not have a lot of money to make my own book. I also kind of wanted the traditional experience too. There's a lot of prestige that comes with it, right? So I kind of wanted to experience that, and I personally was willing to put in the time and the energy and the longevity in order to achieve that, right? Which is why my book publication journey took a good 5 years, right? It ultimately just depends on what you value, depends on what your goals are, depends on what you want. It's really different for every person, but those are all really, really good questions that they asked.
All the models of children's books and children's publishing, the only way you make money in that business is you get massive distribution. There are 2 giant retailers that control the physical distribution and one online one. And
he's probably talking about Borders and Barnes & Noble and Amazon. I think those are the 3 he's probably talking about.
Amazon is my biggest.
yes, Borders?
Borders, Barnes & Noble. Yes, I'm on
You
all,
have
I'm in
all the
those places.
distribution, but the
I don't know if that means brick and mortar placement or if that means that she's just online through those retailers, because that can make a bit of a difference. And just because, let's say that she does have physical bookstore placement within Borders, which it was kind of like another Barnes & Noble at the time, if you're not familiar with that brand, if you're maybe a little bit younger. It still does make a difference though. Just because your book has physical placement doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to sell a lot of copies, right? There's a lot of negotiating that happens on the back end between a publisher and their team, their sales team, and whoever the representative is at each of these stores. I made a video on what it takes to get a book on those front tables at Barnes & Noble. But it's a matter of placement. Just because everything's under the same roof doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to sell a lot of books, right? It's a gamble. They're taking a chance on you and your book. Just statistically speaking, you're more likely to sell more books when it is placed on one of those front store tables right by the front entrance versus a back shelf on the very opposite side of the building where your spine is facing out instead of the cover facing out. You know what I'm talking about? Where you go to Barnes & Noble's, you're looking on the shelf. Sometimes the book is just like, the whole cover is displayed on the shelf. Other times you can only see the spine, right? That makes a really big difference. I look at the front covers more often than I look at the spine, right? I was just at Barnes & Noble the other day and I was browsing books and my eye naturally went to books that were cover out versus spine out, right? So just because you have a lot of visibility, like a physical bookstore, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make a lot of sales, right? It's very similar to, a billboard on the side of a highway. Millions of cars probably drive on a highway every single day that see that same billboard, and I bet you less than a fraction of them actually call the number or go to the website that is featured on that billboard, right? So visibility does not necessarily guarantee sales, right? Ads is a really great example of that. So when she says that she has distribution through Barnes & Noble and Borders, I don't know if that's online or if that's physical, but either way, if she's moved 30,000 copies, that's not nothing, and she's doing something on her end that's been working. I hope they go into it. I don't know if they will because these episodes tend to be so short, but it's definitely interesting.
why aren't the sales more?
Well,
Okay,
more
but do you
importantly, what are you going to do
understand?
with my money?
That's the golden question. Did you hear him? Why aren't the sales more? I don't know. There's different buyer behaviors. The trends ebb and flow. Some things work one day, some things don't work the next day. That's the golden question. What can I do to sell more books? If you ever find out a consistent answer to that, please call me.
I really can't believe that you are not appreciating what I've done.
I very much.
I can't believe you're not appreciating what I've done, sister. You're not there to be appreciated. You're there to make a deal. They're here to give you their money with the intent of making that back and more because you're a worthy investment. Whether you're working with VCs, venture capitalists, or whether you're working with agents or publishers or whatever, do your homework, front load the work, do what you can so that you can make the decision-making process a lot easier for them, right? It's like if you are going to write a book proposal, which is mostly for nonfiction books, memoir being the exception because it's so narrative heavy, right? Memoir is kind of a hybrid. If you write a book proposal, it's basically a business plan for your book, very, very common to write before the book to pitch to agents and publishers. You sign the contract and then you produce the book after you sign the contract. It's very common to talk about who you are, your credentials, what your book is about, the target audience for it, why this is necessary now, why it's timely, marketing, all that stuff, marketing and promotion. You put all that together, you polish it to near perfection if you can, so that you can make it a lot easier on the publisher and on the agent to say yes to a book like that because you've done so much research, right? If I came up to you, I said, I'm producing these stress management book for teenagers. I've put a lot of heart, sweat, blood, and tears into it. A lot of sacrifices have been made. Can you just please appreciate what I've done? Appreciation is nice, but if you're wanting to really create something, you need to have the facts and figures in order to attract that money that they have buckets and pockets full of.
There are things I could do on Amazon to promote, advertising opportunities that will promote.
But Lori,
Okay, so I mentioned book proposals a minute ago. Book proposals, as a refresher, are a business plan for your book. When you are addressing the marketing and promotion section of that business plan, which, by the way, if you go to my website, I think it's laurenericksonofficial.com/courses, I want to say. I'll leave a link in the bio. I have a course on how to make a proposal and how to do all that. So feel free to check that out if you want. You don't have to pay anything. One of the things that you have to do in the marketing section of that proposal is you need to use I will language, very definitive, confirming language. And she just used I can or I could language, right? It's very tentative. It's very unsure. It sounds like she doesn't have a plan. She's asking for $250,000 and she's saying, oh, I could go on Amazon and use ads and promote and stuff like that, right? So I don't know what she's been doing in the meantime, but you really want to avoid that type of tentative, unsure language, right? I have connections who I chatted with who are going to do this for me, or I have a series of podcasts, or I know people with podcasts that have allowed me to sponsor their whatever, right? So really definitive language makes you a lot more attractive because you're sure, you're confident, you have a plan, and you're making them feel better about them giving you this much money with the intent of making it back, right? They're not just, it's the same thing with a book deal. You sign a book contract, you get, let's say, a $50,000 advance. It's not just a bonus because they like you, it's because it's an investment. $50,000 of a book deal, let's say, means that your publisher is expecting you to be partially responsible for helping them to make 50 grand in sales. That's a very, very, very broad definition, right? But if a publisher is giving you money, it's because they're an investment, you know? The smaller the advance, the less copies they think they're going to sell. Generally, the bigger advance, like these big celebrity book deals that are easily 6 figures, sometimes 7, you know, that's a big difference in expectations.
I'll make you an offer. $250,000 for 100% of your company. That's it.
No.
This is the thing that I don't think that people in her position realize who come on this show is that they want majority ownership, which is why they're pitching at sometimes 10%, 20% royalties when they ask for a lot of money. In her case, asking for $250,000 in exchange for 20% royalty, that's not much, right? And I think what they don't often realize is that when these VCs are wanting majority of the ownership, it's not necessarily a bad thing because it means that they're willing to leverage their connections. It means that they're willing to offer their expertise. And it means that they're willing to maybe take on any legal challenges that might come up with, I don't know, licensing, with whatever, with copyright, I don't know. I think that a lot of creatives view their work as their baby, which can be detrimental at times because sometimes it means you're unwilling to be flexible or to leverage other people's expertise to benefit your business, right? If it's a book, whatever, books are business. There's money involved in books. There are bonuses involved in books. There are gambles and investments involved with books, right? And I think that they don't often recognize that if you have majority ownership, even if you self-publish a book where you are 100% responsible, that's a lot of liability that's on your shoulders. That's a lot of stress and management that's on your shoulders. You're wearing multiple hats anytime you do a startup or you're a small business or something like her. I personally would not be opposed to asking for X number of dollars in exchange for maybe 40 or 50% royalty, because it means that I don't have to stress about some things as much as maybe I used to before I asked for that kind of money, right? So in my opinion, saying that something is your baby tends to make you sound a little possessive over your work, in which case, why are you in front of these people asking for their help if you're not willing to share your product that you're pitching? And instead, even when I was writing my own book, I considered myself its surrogate, right? It starts with me, but it ends with the reader. The idea picked me, the book picked me to write it, right? I had this experience of working in a national park as a young adult, so I wrote a coming-of-age memoir with the intent of sharing that story with other people, right? The story chose me to write it, so I did, and now it's for other people, right? Even people who start businesses, let's say that I started a really successful marketing agency or something, which, you know, is a goal of mine. If I brand it and position it the right way and build it up the right way, you know, maybe someone comes along and says, you know, hey, I'd like to buy that business off of you. That's a very common goal for a lot of businesses, maybe even some small presses or something, right? They create a business with the intent that maybe one day someone will buy it. Use that chunk of money, you can invest it, you can start something else, you can start off, you know, do a sister branch or a similar type of franchise or something, like, I don't know. There's just a lot of possibilities and options, and I think sometimes people can get in their own way because they're possessive, because they're prideful, because they don't want to let their baby go, right? But you're making it for the masses, right? Generally, that's what you're doing, or for a very niche, deep collective of people. So these are all really important things to consider that I don't think are always considered.
I'm going to offer you the same deal, but just for 50%.
50%? These are my babies. I mean,
I'm stunned.
Well, I must be quite...
Again, you're its surrogate. It's not your baby. If it's your baby, it's hard. It's really, really hard to separate yourself from your work, right? But you're making it for other people, generally. If you want to write a book for yourself and then do whatever you want with it, go for it. But I feel like generally with any kind of endeavor that people embark on, if it's a business, if it's a product, if it's a service, whatever, generally you're doing it for other people. And if you're asking very powerful people with a lot of connections and very deep pockets for money, but not wanting to let them in on your business, I mean, that you're asking for an allowance. You're asking for gift money for a donation, I think.
I love your idea of the branding. But I also think that Barbara has that ability to do that with us as well. I think we can work together.
Is that a yes?
I accept your deal. It's a crazy deal, but crazy.
Not a crazy deal at all.
She says it's a crazy deal. I don't think it's that crazy. $250,000 for 50, I don't think that's outrageous at all. I think for her it is. But for these sharks who've been in the water for a long time and have found their way around it, you know, I think that makes sense. So I went on ahead and took a look at a website called Shark Tank Recap that talks about what happened after the filming of the episode. You know, what sort of came of her brand? Is it around? What's the aftermath, right? So I went on ahead and looked at it, and it looks like the deal with Barbara didn't end up closing. I'm not really sure why. It says that they couldn't find a clear reason during their Stress-Free Kids update research, but it seems like things worked out for Lori as the company is still in business. So that's really great to hear. That has to be at least 10 years in business, which is crazy. I don't know what their revenue is now, but it says that since Shark Tank, Lori has released multiple new books that have become top sellers on Amazon. She also sells full curriculum, CDs, and more on her website. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at her website real quick. You can see some of her books and stuff there. What's interesting to me is that each of her books looks just a little bit different from the other. Like, I kind of wish there's a little more consistency, which is partially why I think she needs more branding, but there she is. That's super exciting. I'm glad to hear that she's still in business. As seen in Fox News, WebMD. I'm not sure why her book's in WebMD. I'm going to poke around on her Amazon real quick just to see what's around. Oh, there it is. Angry Octopus has almost 1,000 Amazon reviews. It looks like it's doing pretty good, about 4.5 stars or so. Another book has 66 reviews, average of about 4 stars. It doesn't look too bad. I'm glad to see that she's still doing well, but it looks like this Angry Octopus one is her most popular, which was published in 2008. Yeah, interesting. Well, I mean, her ratings aren't too bad either. Children's nonfiction, social issues, mood disorders, stress management. She's under 1,000 in stress management. That's not enough. That's a pretty broad category. Anyway, I hope you got something out of this episode. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe, comment any questions that you have. If you found it valuable, chances are someone else will find it valuable. But I think any conversations that orbit around that intersection of business and books or business and branding or anything like that definitely allows for some really enlightening conversations. So I hope you got something out of it. Otherwise, that's all I have. Take care until next time, and I'll see you around in the next video. See ya. Bye.